go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the February 6th West Fargo City Commission meeting. This evening, we're fortunate to have with us Girl Scout Troop 33027 with us. They're waving at us, so we should wave back. And they're going to help us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please. So girls, would you please stand? We'll let you start. Great job. First order of business is the approval of the agenda, Commissioners.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented and distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Before we go any further, I'd ask everybody in the room to please silence your cell phones while we're in our meeting. I would also point out that Commissioner Simmons is joining us by Zoom this evening, and City Administrator Tina Fisk is not with us this evening. She's not feeling well, so it's all on our Assistant City Administrator, Dustin Scott, will be fielding any questions that we might have. Next order of business is item D, is the approval of the minutes. They have been distributed, and they are from January 3rd, 2023, pages 3 through 4 in the packet.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
It should be from
Second.
January 16th.
Mine says 3rd.
I know
Thank you for correcting me,
but
Commissioner
if you look
Olson.
in the packet, it says the
Yep,
16th.
you're right, you're right. Again, approval of the minutes of January 16th, 2023, pages 3 through 4. I have a motion by Commissioner George. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner
Whatever.
Simmons, second. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 16th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the building permits. The building permits are in the packet and have been distributed. They're on pages 5 through 7.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have items A through J, and it starts on pages 8 and concludes on page 75.
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as distributed, pages 8 through 75. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 1 is a public hearing and first reading of rezoning ordinance for the proposed North Pond at the Preserve 16th edition. We call on Miss Lisa Sankey, City Planner, City of West Fargo. It's on pages 76 through 85 in your packet. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. This application was received in order to accommodate platting and zoning of property to R3 multiple dwellings to allow for a senior affordable housing project. Beyond Shelter has submitted an application showing a 71-unit senior housing project with underground parking on proposed Lot 2, Block 1. The other half, Lot 1 to the north, will remain commercial office park. Prior to the Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing, the developer held 2 neighborhood meetings at the Rusted Center. No one appeared at the noon meeting. 2 individuals appeared at the evening meeting. 1 resident was concerned that they would be looking straight at the building from their backyard across the pond. Both attendees were glad that the project was for seniors and that the proposed plan had underground parking. Notices were also sent to property owners within 150 feet and other applicable agencies and departments. That information is in your packet. Additionally, the applicant is petitioning for reduced off-street parking requirements from 142 to 106 spaces. This would be reviewed separately at a later date. This is a public hearing and first reading. I'm available to answer any questions, as is the applicant.
Thank you, Ms. Sankey. Are there any questions, Commissioner? With that, we close the regular agenda and we move into a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak on the proposed North Pond at the Preserve 16th Edition, the rezoning ordinance? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on item number 1, the first reading of rezoning ordinance for the proposed North Pond at the Preserve, the 16th Edition? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to the rezoning ordinance of the proposed North Pond at the Preserve 16th Edition? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. We move back into the regular agenda. Commissioners? Any questions of Ms. Sankey again, or thoughts on this project? Commissioner George?
I'll
I'll
just
make a
quick
motion to
comment.
approve. Oh,
Sorry. I
Please.
was just going to say I'm excited about this project. I think it's great for the community, and I'm in full support of it. I think it's awesome.
I agree. Commissioner Simmons?
I was just making a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds it. I have a motion and a second to approve the rezoning ordinance for the proposed North Pond at the Preserve at the 16th Edition. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 2 is a conditional use permit for temporary concrete crushing and aggregate stockpiling, West Fargo 12th Edition. Aaron Nelson, Planning Director, City of West Fargo. It has been distributed and it is in your packet. It is on pages 86 through 96. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening to you as well, Commissioners. So item number 2 is a request for a conditional use permit to allow for temporary concrete crushing and aggregate stockpiling at 2351 8th Avenue Northwest. The applicant intends to lease this property to go in construction to be temporarily used for such purposes over the course of a construction project set to take place this summer in regards to the NDDOT project for I-94. The crushing operation is slated to take place in 2 increments over 3-week periods in May, as well as 3 weeks in August. At their January 10th, 2023 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend this application for approval with the conditions as outlined within the staff report. Specifically, the conditions as noted do state that the applicant would be required to, or the applicant's contractor would be required to obtain a construction stormwater permit from the City Engineering Department prior to any operations. The applicant would be required to meet all applicable state, federal, and local regulations in relation to concrete crushing operations, as well as the hours of operations would be limited to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., which would be consistent with similar conditional use permits issued by the city in past years. Additionally, this is intended to be temporary in nature during the course of construction project. And so this conditional use permit would cease by October 31st of 2023, which would be the end of the construction project. The applicant is represented, or is Dakota Fence, and the contractor who they would be leasing the property to is also represented here tonight, should you have any questions for the applicant.
Commissioner George?
2 quick questions. One is when you talked about the stormwater permit, does that have to do with, are they using water for dust mitigation? Is that what that's all about? So I'm wondering that. And then 2, I'm wondering about the noise. I think I did read something in here about they didn't think that was going to be an issue, but I am wondering about how loud this is expected to be.
Yeah, I can answer the first question, and I might defer to the applicant in regards to some of the noise questions there. So the stormwater permit itself, it is intended to be, or anticipate that there would be some type of runoff, whether it's rain They do intend to use some water spraying as part of their dust mitigation technique, and so there would likely be runoff of some type, and then when you typically have small particles or aggregate material, there is a tendency for those to run off into the storm sewer collection system. And so that's, and I can defer to engineering too if I get any of the details wrong, but something like that is a typical development requirement for typical development. Since they're not going to be actually constructing any buildings or anything, this is a kind of a unique use of the property, and so just making sure that they go through that kind of stormwater double check, if you will, on what mitigation techniques they are using to protect the storm sewer system. In regards to the noise itself, apologize, I don't have a map here in front of you, but the location is within a heavy industrial area. It's just south of the stormwater, or excuse me, the sewage lagoons, south of the Cheyenne diversion. And I guess I can't speak to any decibel levels or anything like that. That's where I would have to defer to the applicant.
I guess my thought is just because there are a couple of neighborhoods up there, so I'm hoping it isn't going to be too disruptive with neighborhoods. So,
And would you like the applicant to come up and address that at all?
if anybody knows, that'd just be nice.
Good evening, council members. My name's Kurt Horner with Gowan Construction. And yes, there is a little bit of noise with the operation. During the day, we'll be having trucks coming in and out, bringing the product coming in. It's salvaged concrete and asphalt, and we have a subcontractor, Intex, that crushes it down. And he's gone by 7 p.m. every day, and I feel I've done a lot of these where we're out in the country and there's no residents, and we are kind of on the west end of Industrial Park, and I think the closest residents would be just on the east side of the river there, so I don't anticipate any problem with that, and if there is complaints, we'll definitely address them and see what we can do, but I don't anticipate anything.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioners, additional questions? Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I had the same concern or same question about the noise, so I'm glad that was addressed here, so.
We all ask the same question. The mitigation of the dust is important, or suppression of the dust is important. And the other thing is that will your office be monitoring and have oversight as to the 3 weeks and the 3 weeks? A conditional use permit, when you apply for it, it's very specific for the timeline. And so
It is, yep. And so the included in your packet is a copy of the actual conditional use permit agreement, which basically puts those conditions into a legal agreement with the applicant. And so it does give the city the authority to pull or withdraw the permit or cancel the permit if those conditions are violated. So I don't know if that answers that question or that concern, but it's something that if we receive complaints or we have any indication that they are violating them, then yes, we would work with other departments to investigate that and follow up accordingly.
So the conditional use permits, the gentleman, maybe I misunderstood you, but the hours of operation are 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.?
What we requested, but it's probably going to be 7 to 7.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Nelson? Commissioner Simmons, you
What
okay?
were the hours, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Yeah, what were the hours again? I'm sorry, what were the hours again?
They requested 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., but it would appear that it's going to be 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay, so that will have to be changed then, correct?
Yeah, that document will have to be changed, yes.
And just for a point of clarification there, the
Okay.
7 a.m. to 11 p.m. as outlined in the staff report, that was pulled from similar conditional use permits in the past. The applicant does not intend to go that late, and so if the intent is to change that condition, I would just want to confirm that that is okay
Please.
with the applicant.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, 7 to 7.
7 to 7. Commissioner Simmons, that comment's for you.
Yes, absolutely, 7 to 7.
All right, very good. Any additional questions, Mr. Nelson? What is your pleasure, Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the conditional use permit for temporary concrete crushing and aggregate stockpiling, West Fargo 12th edition, as outlined in the conditional use permit. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 3, a resolution for parking reduction for proposed tap room, Suket's 3rd edition. Mr. Aaron Nelson, Planning Director for the City of West Fargo. The order of business this evening is to approve the parking reduction resolution for the proposed tap room. It is on pages 97 through 103 in your packet. Commissioner Nelson.
Just,
Commissioner Nelson.
we may have lost Commissioner Simmons, not sure. But just
Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Just
Can't see your picture, Mark. There you are.
Okay, I can hear you though.
You appeared briefly, and then there you are. You're back. Oh, boy,
Yeah.
you got a lot of things open, pal.
We got some problems there. As long as we can hear him, that should be
Something's wrong.
All right, there
Yeah.
you go. We're good again. Mr. Nelson, please continue.
Thank you. Item number 3 is a resolution for parking reduction. Here, the applicant, Junkyard Brewing and Enclave Development, is requesting a reduction in off-street parking requirements for a proposed tap room at 409 Cheyenne Street, in accordance with Section 4-450 of the city ordinances. The applicant intends to convert the old Bell Bank building, which is downtown, into a tap room, which requires a greater number of off-street parking stalls than currently exist on the site today. The applicant feels that the minimum parking requirement is excessive for their need. In addition to that, there's not the physical ability to add the number of parking stalls that would otherwise be required for an eating and drinking establishment. As such, they are requesting approval of a parking reduction so as to provide a total of 45 parking stalls on site in conjunction with the roughly 27 or so on-street parking stalls that immediately abut the property to the northwest and south. Staff is generally supportive of the request for several reasons as outlined within the staff report. Firstly, the proposed parking ratio would be comparable to similarly situated establishments on Cheyenne Street. The current parking minimums would also require that the parking lot be 3 times the size of the building square footage, which in staff's view is inconsistent with it's inappropriate for walkable urban development and would be contrary to the community's vision for downtown West Fargo as expressed within the West Fargo 2.0 comprehensive plan. Drinking establishments should generally be encourage their customers to utilize alternative forms of transportation other than driving alone to the establishment. And then the reduction or elimination of mandated parking is considered to be a best practice currently, especially for downtown urban environments. Neighboring communities of Fargo and Moorhead have both eliminated parking minimums within their downtown zoning districts. Additionally, public parking is available on street within this area. The city invested in providing some additional diagonal parking specifically along Cheyenne Street, as well as on the north and south sides of this particular property. Public parking such as that is expensive, and folks should be encouraged to utilize that publicly available parking. Conversely, there are certainly some concerns that should be noted when it comes to such parking reductions. Typically, those concerns mainly come from adjacent residences or businesses who have concern with either folks utilizing their parking lots, or they are typically accustomed to having kind of freely available parking in front of their homes and within their vicinity. Attached within the staff report, or attached to the staff report within the meeting packet, is a letter from the applicant that specifically outlines their request and their intent with the proposed parking reduction. Although not directly related to the parking itself, they do note that their Moorhead location, in their mind, they feel that their location in Moorhead did directly result in some spin-off of roughly $20 million in new development within a kind of a older area of Moorhead. With that, on page 2 of the memo in your packet, there's kind of a brief overview, I guess, of the specific numbers themselves, if you're interested. Currently, the minimum parking required would be 102 parking stalls. They are proposing to provide, again, 45 stalls on site, which would equate to a total parking reduction of 57 parking stalls. Also included within the memo is some policy analysis, which I briefly kind of touched on a little bit with the intent of the downtown itself as outlined and discussed within the West Fargo 2.0 comprehensive plan. Additionally, the City of West Fargo did participate in a parking and access study in 2018 with the City of Fargo and MetroCog, which had similar recommendations for reduction in mandated off-street parking. Ultimately, staff recommends approval of the request. Included in the packet is a resolution for approval should you choose to be in favor of this request. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for staff. Otherwise, representation from the applicant is here tonight. Should you have any questions for them?
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Questions, Commissioner?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the parking reduction resolution for the proposed tap room in Suket's third edition. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 4 is a proposal of Child Care Workforce Grant. Casey Sanders Berglund, Economic Development Manager for the City of West Fargo. The purpose of our discussion this evening is the approval to adopt a Child Care Workforce Grant, pages 103 through 105 in your packet. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. As you may recall, during a commission meeting earlier this fall, Commissioner George requested staff time from the city to look at childcare within West Fargo. I think you're all aware that childcare is essential to our businesses because without care, we would lose a large percentage of our workforce. During this process of meeting, our group was very curious to find out what that looked like for our community. So this process consisted of meeting with various sizes of providers, hearing about their concerns one-on-one, conducting a survey out to residents through utility bills, as well as understanding what the state's potential solutions could look like through this legislative session. So among the many things that were discussed, several things were not a surprise to hear around staffing shortages, pay, and as we spoke to businesses, those were probably the two biggest things that they spoke about. And parents, of course, continued to bring up the concern around affordability. I want to be clear as I move forward, though, in my proposal that we are not proposing financial support for parents, for parents for care, or around staffing as well. These discussions, of course, we want to help support at the state level. Instead, when looking at the survey results from just the West Fargo residents, and you can see this information in your packet, there was 104 residents who stated that they are looking for care, which represents approximately 162 children. Additionally, 65% of the responders from our survey stated they had to utilize alternative care. So noting what that looks like, it might be using care from a friend one day, a neighbor the next, creating instability. 45% of responders shared that the lack of childcare has affected their career. For example, maxing out on paid vacation time, leaving one job that they were skilled at, taking in a different job for alternative hours or part-time, and many of them stating that they were continuously worried if today would be the day that they showed up and lost their care. Most significantly, however, 14% said that they would identify that that lack of childcare was the reason that they left the workforce, and 24% said that they would reconsider rejoining the workforce if care was more available or affordable. So with all of this information, our subcommittee, that it was 2 commissioners and staff, felt that the way in which our city could support our residents, businesses, and potentially expand our workforce availability was to focus on childcare capacity or availability. So today, the proposal in front of you is regarding Childcare Facilities Improvement Workforce Grant. The funds for this grant would come from economic development sales tax. So this grant is proposed for current or new childcare providers within the city of West Fargo, not the school district of West Fargo. The program's goal is to financially basically support a provider that would be requesting assistance for specific eligibility improvements around safety, capital improvements to the facility, essential equipment to a business regarding licensing, and the goal would eventually be to grow capacity in childcare openings. Now, what that also can mean, according to this program, is maintaining the current amount of open childcare slots within our community. Many of the conversations that I had with in-home providers, as well as a handful of centers, was that year to year, looking at their budget, certain things, ebb and flow. Their margins are very slim, and so we would hate to see closures of those providers. So looking at the financial analysis of this program as presented in the agenda, the maximum awards would be for 4 different types of providers. Additionally, the centers would have the opportunity, based on our survey results, for a supplemental award of $15,000 for an infant fit-up room. Considering from our survey results, infants were one of the highest needs. So currently, it is proposed that each applicant can apply once per location every 3 years. However, understanding that this program, because it would be new, should we adopt this, would be reviewed in approximately 18 months to evaluate these requirements, the impact, and sustainability. With that, I will answer any questions.
Commissioner George.
I just first want to say thank you so much. I'm so proud and impressed with all the work that Mrs. Sanders Berglund has done on this project. It's been just wonderful working with her. I want to thank the entire team for the work they've done on this, and Commissioner Simmons as well for agreeing to work on this project. For years, we have heard from the public that we need to do something in regards to child care. There just isn't child care available, and so I decided it's time. We need to step up as a city and we need to do something. So that's why I initiated to get this program going. And initially, I didn't know what this was going to look like, but with the work of the team, they put together this fantastic program. And I really believe that this program can make a difference in our community. With this program, it doesn't talk to the affordability aspect, but it talks to the accessibility aspect. People are complaining there just isn't childcare available. So with this program, we hope to be able to keep centers open as well as open new centers. And I think this program, I'm so proud of the work of this team, and I really think this program can make a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson.
On your subcommittee recommendation, it is to approve a draft workforce grant. When will we see a final draft? Is this the final product, or is there more to come? Because it says this is a draft workforce grant as proposed.
Sure. Just for clarification, this would be the proposed grant in front of you. However, I noted this as a draft basically because we can make any additional changes to some of the recommendations.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm glad you clarified that.
I just wanted to make sure that, because it says it's a draft, so are we going to see a final product? Because we can approve a draft, but
Sure.
Will you then bring it back? Because I want to know if this is the final draft, then I have some questions and concerns. And I'll
Mayor?
Just a moment, please. Commissioner.
I would like to put a cap on the funds coming out of here at, let's just say $1 million, for example,
Sure.
rather than just leaving it open-ended. And also, I'd like to put for us to consider maybe you've got in here that's going to be reviewed 18 months, but then in the same paragraph, you say that they can apply once every 3 years. We don't even know how long this would, maybe we won't even get any applicants. Who knows? We would get some, but do we want to keep it going for 25 years? Or do we want to only going for 10 years, or 5 or 6? So to me, and we can always review that again and renew it, but I would like to see a timeline, because I don't know if you've got a timeline like on our enterprise grants, just for, who knows where we may need those dollars elsewhere, just for things like that. And who would do the review of this is what another, of these applications, to determine that they are actually needed rather than a want.
Yeah, great. So I'll try to address that. A cap is something that we could entertain here tonight if that's something, should the commission choose to move forward with. Essentially, and then your second question around the applicants being able to apply once every 3 years per location, and then we would review it within 18 months. So basically, the program would be proposed that essentially at that review time, in 18 months, if we choose to continue on with the program, we would be able to look back as to who has already applied. They wouldn't be able to apply again right away in that 18-month or next year timeframe. We would need to know that they can't apply again till that 3rd year at minimum. So I can make that additionally more clear. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. And then as far as review, there's a couple of options. Currently, any incentive would go through, my office and have those conversations. If they're eligible, we would move those forward. Other applications would then move forward through the Economic Development Advisory Committee. However, we could also entertain the idea of having a separate subcommittee.
Commissioner Simmons, you had a comment.
Well, my comment was just to Commissioner Olson that, the draft was put in there just so we have the flexibility to make the recommendations that you're mentioning now. But I will defer actually to Commissioner George, because I'm sure she is very passionate enough to answer some of these questions too. Commissioner George?
Yeah, I agree with everything Mrs. Sanders-Bergling is saying. It's a draft so we can still take advice from the commission and take recommendations and still make those changes as needed. I guess what I would say is I would look to move this forward, and any additional comments or recommendations, we could, make our changes, and then we can maybe bring that back in 2 weeks if we wanted to, or I'd be open to something like that if that's what the commission wants. I guess we're open to thoughts at this point.
As Commissioner George stated earlier, this is a much talked about need within the community as well as with the state of North Dakota. And I shared some information with her before the meeting started this evening that at the present time there are 9 bills in the Senate side, all dealing with child care and different types of programs and things that they can help, and one in the House of Representatives. So there's 10 bills that are out there, and how that final look might be is anybody's best guess. But I like the idea that if we can have a little more time to digest, and as if you want to fine tune it with some of the research that, and Ms. Sanders-Bergling did help me with that research. So if we want to do that, is to see where the possibilities are. I agree with Commissioner Olson on the cap. Until we see how this plays out and how it all works, I think that that's a worthy suggestion. Anyone else?
Would there be any, just so it's out there, would there be any kind of inspections done to make sure that the facility went through with the, I know this would be like an application process where they would be reimbursed after they've already installed whatever they've applied for, then we would reimburse them rather than giving the money up front, right? That's how it would work? So, given that they've actually got that, but would we have our building inspector go around and make sure that, let's just, for example, they bought 5 cribs. We gonna go and make sure that there are 5 cribs in there? You know, just for an example,
Sure.
that was an easy example, you know.
Sure. Yep. And we could certainly write that as part of the program agreement, as what that looks like.
Just for, you know, accountability, being transparent with the public that we're spending, you know, sales tax money. And even though this isn't a direct economic impact, but it is a indirect, because if we can keep these facilities open, then we can keep their guardians and parents employed, and then that's an economic driver right there.
Correct.
So it's a wise use of our funds, I believe, but I think we need to have some accountability built into here, and until we see the final draft and the application and all that, then, you know, that's.
Mayor?
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. I agree. I guess there's somewhat with Commissioner Olson. That's fine. But I think that we need to, that accountability is definitely what we need. But I think we need to set some type of a minimum, because I don't think we want our staff running out there to count 5, beds. I mean, I get that, but maybe we should have it like if it's, a minimum amount. Say they take $10,000 and they redo a room or something, then absolutely. But if they're just applying for little small grants for $1,000, I think it would be a huge waste of our resources to go and check that out.
Well, Ms. Sanders Berglund said that, that they'll be reimbursed on invoices. So
Right.
they're going to have a proof of the improvements that they're making. So, and
I just wanted to throw
obviously-
that out there for
certainly,
discussion.
I understand completely, Commissioner Olson. And obviously, any improvements that they're going to make, if it requires a building permit or the like, we will have inspectors there, like we would have for any other entity within the community. So there is a checks and balances there to some degree. So what we're asking for, Commissioner Simmons, do you have another point?
I do. Thank you. Commissioner George, would you be willing to table this for 2 weeks to do the fine tuning, or would you prefer to move this forward and we do it as we go?
Well, I would ask that if we could have a commission consensus, that we continue to move this forward and have the dialogue. Commissioner George has heard some of the comments. Commissioner Simmons and Commissioner Olson have included in there. I don't think it's necessary to table it. I would like to say, what do you think would be a good feasible date going forward? The first or second meeting in March, or Commissioner George?
I mean, ideally, I'd like to see it in 2 weeks, if that's possible, to make the changes, because I'd like to get this out there to the public as soon as possible. I guess if that is feasible, if it's not, that's okay, we can change that. But I want to make sure it's a meeting I can be present at as well.
We want you here.
But what I would maybe suggest, instead of tabling, maybe move it forward as a draft, knowing we'll make some changes still to it, if that would be something.
Well,
I would support that.
Okay.
All right.
One thing, when you do bring it back, I would like to see the eligible improvements to actually identify what they are, so they're not vague, and we don't have to spend a lot of time wondering, okay, this person's buying this, does that fit, or does this come up with a list of everything that you're going to make eligible? And if it's not on the list, it's pretty simple. It's not eligible.
I participated in the Chamber of Commerce's Eggs and Issues when they brought this up, and it was really interesting because some of the church kindergartens that had to close was because they didn't have egress windows, or they didn't have another bathroom for the number of children that they had there. So this program could very well really work in that nature, so.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're thinking. I hate to limit it, like if it's not on the list, that it isn't eligible, because there might be things we haven't thought of. But we have discussed that it would have to go through a committee and they wouldn't just automatically be approved.
So we have a consensus to move this forward, and we'll,
Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. I'll make the motion that we approve the draft and move this forward and bring the final back 2 weeks from now at the next meeting.
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 5 is Johnson Controls HVAC contract. Mr. Matt Anvik, Director of Public Works for the City of West Fargo. Purpose of this discussion this evening is to approve the contract with Johnson Controls for HVAC services and maintenance. It is on pages 106 through 132 in the packet. Good evening, Mr. Anvik. Welcome.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. Like I said, tonight, we just have for your approval is a 5-year HVAC maintenance and service contract with Johnson Controls. This one, kind of does City Hall, PD, Public Works, and the new fire station and the South Fire Station buildings. This is just type of work that we have just for the general maintenance and service of the different heating and cooling units that we have and air handling systems in the buildings. We've been kind of going by either just a year-to-year contract or sometimes just having, them as a service call. This would just kind of give us basically a budget number for the next 5 years. And then after that 5 years is up, we can continue that on each year after that with mutual agreement. So I guess each year is right around between that $43,000 to $46,000 over the 5 years. Total worth of that contract is $226,231. With that, I guess I'll just stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Anvik. So something fails and we replace it and it's new equipment. Is there any part of that in the contract? I didn't read the fine print. Anything in there that, if we're going to have less maintenance on something like that, are there conditions to alter that, or is it, this is the fee per year for the next 5 to 6 years?
This is, to answer your question, I guess, yes, it is. If we have something new come in there where there isn't going to be that maintenance on it, we can adjust that maintenance schedule with that. And depending on what type of equipment it is or, the amount of service it will need, we can adjust that up and down. This is kind of just based off the numbers that we have currently.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Anvik. Questions, additional questions, Commissioner Abelson?
Well, the reason why we're doing this is we don't have anybody on staff right now that's trained to do this.
Correct. And if we were, to get a journeyman HVAC technician, everything would be well over $100,000 a year. So it just makes more sense to have somebody else on call to do that.
Additional questions for Mr. Anvik?
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Anderson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the contract with Johnson Controls for HVAC service and maintenance as outlined in the contract that is in our packet. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 6 is the 2023 mill and overlay through various neighborhoods. Create Improvement District 2261 and approve the engineer's report, authorize a resolution of necessity, and direct the engineer to prepare a task order for basic services. Again, for mill and overlay. Mr. Dan Hansen, City of West Fargo. Welcome.
Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. In the CIP, we've identified, there was identified 2 different mill and overlay projects in various neighborhoods that were identified on the 2022 and 2023 CIP. This is us bringing this forward. It's a fairly large project. If you take a look at in the packet if you've had a chance to review it. I'll go through it. I put together a PowerPoint presentation that we can go through that kind of takes us through this project. Just to circle back a little bit, we discussed this briefly at the December 19th, 2022 Commission meeting, and the thing that we discussed was that mill and overlay projects, they're not reconstructing the roadway. These are revitalization of the existing pavements. There's curb and gutter that's sagged. There's some trench settlement and things of that nature that are going on with the ride and these roadways that we would look to correct, as well as to mill out the top 2 inches of asphalt and put a new surface on it. Mill and overlay projects are typically scheduled in and around the 10 to 15 year mark in a pavement's life cycle. The commission directed the engineer to prepare a report at that time, so that way I could come back tonight and we could discuss potentially moving forward with the project or get through any questions that you might have for it. So I thought the first thing that I could do is the areas that we have proposed in this engineer's report are the South Pond areas, Maple Ridge additions, Shadowwood, West River, Reserve at Osgood are shown in there, as well as Westport Beach and the Wilds, some of the first developments of the Wilds additions. So you can see there's a number of different developments and additions that are proposed to be milled and overlaid with this project. Project specifics on this: these neighborhoods were identified because they were constructed 10 to 15 years ago, falling within that pavement life cycle. So the various, again, issues that we had with the streets that we identified were, again, areas of settlement, Sumter broken curb, asphalt failures, areas that need to be patched. The patching, the curb replacement in the sumped areas and things like that would be occur first, and then also, with this, we would be replacing the vast majority of the pedestrian curb ramps in each one of these neighborhoods. Part of the ADA law is that when you do anything more than a chip seal, you need to make sure that all the ADA ramps in the neighborhoods are ADA accessible. So those are added into this project, into the cost of this project. The intent would be that we would have one district but bid out as 2 separate projects. One project would be designed and bid out by a consultant, and then the other one would be designed by the city engineering department. And so we would take basically about half the project's design, and the other half would be the consultant. And the reason for that is we didn't want to make this one incredibly large project with the amount of concrete that we have to do with the ped ramps because of the availability of concrete and the ability for contractors to get it and be able to work on it. We thought that breaking it out would be the proper way to go with that. I did reach out to local contractors, and they reinforced that this really needs to be broken out into at least 2 different projects. So the intent would be to have 2 separate bids, 2 separate awards, but again, one district, and the work would take place this upcoming summer. So included with the assessment procedures that we need to do. Again, there's some different assessment districts shown on these figures, but the assessment districts that are being shown are, I shouldn't say that they're districts, they're actually areas within one district that would be adjacent to a roadway that's getting milled and overlaid. And these are basically the same neighborhoods that I had pointed out before, everybody that's adjacent to the area that's getting milled and overlaid. So again, it kind of goes through those same developments. And so lastly, the project costs that we have estimated for the local mill and overlay areas, which would be 80% assessed, 20% city cost. For those local mill and overlay areas would be $4,712,000. The local mill and overlay city contribution, if the city were to pay 20% of those, not of those costs, but on top of those, is $1,178,000. What is also included is there's some minor work on 36th Avenue, as well as a milling and overlaying of 9th Street, which those are more regional roadways. Given some discussions that we've had, it's a minor portion of this project to do those areas. And instead of opening up another huge area-wide assessment district, because those are regional roads, we're proposing in our engineer's report that the city would cover the $280,000 of those costs. And also, we have included in proposed in that engineer's report that the regional city contribution for all the ADA improvements would be paid for with city funds as well. And the reasoning behind that is over the course of the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to be replacing a lot of curb ramps. Each time we do that, we're not necessarily setting up an assessment district. So keeping that as a city paid item in this project moving forward, anytime that we would be reconstructing these ped ramps, we would intend to move forward with those as a city cost and not be assessed. So when we break the whole project down, the total estimated project costs for this is $7.9 million, with the estimated city cost of $3,188,000 and an estimated assessed cost of $4,712,000, which is roughly a 40% city cost and 60% assessed cost. To break down the assessment funding information out of that $4,712,000, the intent would be to take the total cost of the project that is to be assessed and calculate out an equivalent unit, single-family residential, 1 EU, multifamily residential, 0.6 EUs, as is our assessment policy. We also have a couple oversized commercial areas. Those EUs would be based upon the front footage, is what we have proposed, with the estimated cost per equivalent unit, is what that stands for, would be $3,325. So if you were to take that special assessment, that's an annual payment. If you were to put it into a 25-year cycle of estimated $235.92. I do not recommend that we go 25 years with this, because a mill and overlay isn't necessarily designed to last 25 years, and you don't want the pavement to deteriorate to the point where you're back doing this again at some point and coming back with another special assessment district overlaying on top of the one that we're doing currently. So I would recommend we would look in the neighborhood of the 15 years, possibly 20 years, which would be at 15 years an annual estimated payment of $320.34. Those are just some examples that I've provided for this. And then from the city's funding portion of it, we have $1,178,000, which would be the 20% city cost of the local mill and overlay portion of the project. And then also the $280,000 for those regional components on 9th Street and 36th Avenue, with the regional city's contribution for the ADA ramps throughout the whole entire project of the estimated $1,730,000, bringing the total city cost again to $3,188,000. And it's assumed that the city's portion would be project costs would be paid using the capital improvement sales tax. I put a couple slides in here just showing if we were to proceed with this project and proceed with a special assessment, there is a process that we have, an improvement process overview, and I put a "You are here" sign basically. The first thing that we do is we get the reports back, we get an understanding of what is proposed to be done and an estimate of those costs, and then we get to a point where we decide, is the project A, proceeding, and B, proceeding utilizing special assessments or not special assessments. So if we were to use special assessments, we'd have to create the district and do those things that are listed in the cover sheet. If we were not, we would be able to proceed directly to plans and specs, but then that's a totally different conversation as far as the amount of funds being expended on these projects. So I won't read through this slide, but basically we're at the very beginning of the special assessment process through the Century Code if we were to proceed in that direction. And in the end, if the commission wishes to proceed with the project utilizing special assessments, the action items that we need tonight is to create the improvement district, direct the engineer to prepare the report, approve the engineer's report, which is in the packet, adopt the resolution declaring the work to be necessary, which would trigger a public hearing that we would have to have on the resolution of necessary work. And then we would direct the engineer to prepare a task order for the basic services of this project. And with that, that's a lot of information packed into a small presentation, but I would be open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Commissioner George?
So these are relatively newer neighborhoods, and I understand there's a lifespan on these roads, but how do I explain to the people in the older neighborhoods that their roads are not getting done, but the new neighborhoods are?
We have, in the core area study, identified roadways that are, and neighborhoods that are needing to get reconstructed. We have identified the first one that we will be bringing forth to the commission for that process to start. However, just as this project probably provided some sticker shock, the sticker shock on that neighborhood reconstruction has come back quite high as well, and we're still internalizing that. Our intent would be to, if we're proceeding with our first reconstruction of the core area, would be to proceed with the project in 2024. But we're moving forward at a pace that we're more comfortable with, because prior to bringing it out here for approval, we wanted to make sure that we had a presentation that we can present and have discussions on what we're moving forward with. So we are planning on doing both. This was just in the CIP to move forward with this.
This is where I'm at. I appreciate your response, and I understand what you're saying. I'll just say where I'm at personally, I would rather see resources directed towards fixing the old neighborhoods first. And then, of course, there's a special assessment issue, which we all know where I'm at on that. So that's just where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner. Additional questions? Commissioner Anderson?
Yeah, so I got a couple questions, comment, and then I guess a question for the commission. So I guess if we didn't do this, what issues could arise? How long would the road last? Things like that.
Well, that's a great question, Commissioner Anderson. If we didn't do this, people would still be driving on the road next year and the following year and the following year. These roads aren't dilapidated. We would probably work with Public Works to see what patching we would need to do on a couple of the smaller areas. For that sake, the purpose of doing the mill and overlay is to extend the life cycle of the roadway. So what I've always went as a rule of thumb is you construct a roadway, you do a chip seal basically pretty soon after you do the new roadway. Then for asphalt, not concrete, obviously. And then within the first 10 to 15 years, you would do a mill and overlay on it. Sometimes you'd even avoid the chip seal, because the roads, if you're going to have the trench settlement that we've seen, a lot of times you don't do the chip seal right away if you're going to be doing the mill and overlay in the first 10 to 15 years, due to the fact that a chip seal is not going to fix any trench settlement or anything like that. So you'll notice some of these developments that we have out there, they weren't chip sealed, but we are planning on doing the mill and overlay. They're beyond the ability to have a chip seal perform on those roadways. And then you basically repeat that cycle 3 times, and then in the end, you should be able to get about 45 to 50 years out of an asphalt roadway with these. Not doing the mill and overlays, it just reduces the life cycle of the roadway. So eventually, do I have how many years is it going to reduce the life cycle of the roadway? I don't, but I would say it's probably taking, likely 10 years off of the life cycle of the roadway if you were to just let it deteriorate.
Okay. When we're talking about special assessments here, what year would you anticipate this being assessed? Would this be a 2024 assessment, or would it extend out into 2025?
Dustin, you can probably take that better than I can, but.
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. To answer your question, Commissioner Anderson, the construction, if it did take place and complete in 23, we would likely then go out to the bond market in 24 and go through the assessment process in 24. We would just want to make sure that we have final construction dollars in place. So if this ends up being a 2-year construction project, like Dan Hansen said, it's certainly very large in scale. So if we completed construction in 24, we might not have final numbers and be able to bond until the end of 24, early 25.
Okay. All right. So I really struggle with this one because of the high dollar amounts. Looking at the equivalent unit, it is higher than what we assessed out for Cheyenne Street from Beaton down to 40th. So I really struggle with this one. I guess a question for the commission, and answer it, don't answer it, just something to think about is what have we done to look at other ways of funding these projects? One idea I had, and it's an idea, it's something I want to look into, so I have no idea what it looks like on paper, but if we were to bond out these projects and use our sales tax to pay for that, I want to see what that looks like. So that's an idea that I have. It may work, may not work, but there's things I think we can do, and I think we need to look at because we need to get away from special assessments as much as possible. And quite frankly, a project like this, to me, I don't feel like we should be assessing it. So that's where I'm at, and take it as a rhetorical question, or if anybody has comments to that, that's fine. But that's where I am at with this. I really struggle with this one.
Real quick,
George.
I thought you brought up something really interesting, though, in this presentation, because you were talking about if you were to special assess it out, you had 15 years and 25 years. And, you know, let's say you talk about right around that $25 amount, something we had talked about, or that's come up in conversations, is doing some sort of infrastructure fee instead of special assessments. And I think that right there gave us a really good idea of what we could use as an infrastructure fee. If it was, say, $25 a month to go on top of the utility bill, that looks like it might cover the special assessment you might need in your neighborhood. To me, that's something I'd like to see explored. So I'm glad we're talking about this today. I really am. That's where I'm at. So
I don't know if the state legislature or state statute would allow us to establish a fee, a utility fee.
In lieu of special assessments, you can. That was done 2 years ago.
Where?
But you can't assess one
can't
citizen,
assess, right.
one and the other.
Right.
So that would involve us paying off bonds of about, what, $400 million, bankrupt the city.
Yep.
So that's, Mr. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner President Dardis. I was going to go right into that direction. The city of Bismarck has struggled with implementing that particular fee since legislation passed that ability. We can certainly look into it where they're at with their city. Certainly, I was looking for ways to reduce special assessments. And to that point, just for some historical peace of mind, over the years as we have done mill and overlays,
Good point for you.
traditionally they were 100% assessed. And like Dan said, we try to hit these neighborhoods within 10 years so that we can extend the life cycle. Unfortunately, there are some older areas of town now that they once upon a time had a mill and overlay, and it maybe bought them a little more time, but we do have other areas that are now failing to the point where you can't just go in and do a simple mill and overlay. You have a lot of infrastructure to completely reconstruct, which all comes to the head, and that priority discussion becomes very challenging. And where do you spend your dollars? And this is where the commission has to wrestle with that discussion of, there are neighborhoods out here that are 10 to 15 years old, that the streets really could use this project, but is that where we put our money? And there are also 50 to 60-year-old neighborhoods now that once upon a time maybe had it, but are certainly at a point where they need to be completely replaced. And is that where we spend our money? And can we somehow do both? And all the while trying to keep our special assessments down. And so certainly a challenge for staff to continue to work on as far as it relates to this project. You got a tough decision to make. Thank you.
Commissioner Olson.
I've gotten complaints from residents in the West River additions about their road conditions and all that, and they're kind of one of the older neighborhoods there and I've driven it, and it's not good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a need for this, and yes, we struggle with how to pay it, but I think we can look at different options. I don't know if we can dare delay this until we've got it all figured out. because to get a contractor and all that kinds of stuff and the bids done, it just pushes everything back that much further.
I mean, what if we just do patching? I mean, is it that area, that West River area, is that, you know,
My
hard
question
enough or-
is, along that line, Commissioner Anderson, is what role does our public works play with all this new equipment that we purchased? Is there some avenues there that we could narrow the scope of this project or what it might be done? And the other thing is, in regard to Commissioner George's comments, it's a comment that we all agree with. We do have prairie dog funds. Now, back when the prairie dog funds plan was first initiated, Commissioner George and Commissioner Anderson were not on the commission. The rest of us were. And at that point in time, we made a commitment that the prairie dog funds, which is $12 million a biennium, if in fact all the buckets fill, was going to be dedicated to the older neighborhoods, as we use the term from Main Avenue to 13th Avenue, you know, the core of our city. So I just remind the commissioners about that. The buckets are all full, so we should be receiving, or have received, about $6 million. Dustin? Mr. Scott, excuse me.
Yes, we have received, my understanding is about 2.5 thus far. We have another 8 or so coming because the buckets finally.
That is correct, and I was advised by the legislators that all the buckets are full, so that distribution should be taking place relatively soon. Just a reminder for all of us to keep as well. Mr. Anvick.
Good evening, Commissioner President and Commissioners. Something like this, you know, we've Public Works and Engineering have kind of been going back and forth on ways to get this pavement management stuff going, and this is just one more tool. Like Commissioner President Dartis said earlier, you know, we purchased the paving equipment, and that's just another tool, and that's the areas that we want to focus on the areas that are in between a mill and overlay and a full reconstruction, where we can get in there and save that for 5 years or prolong that life for 10, 15 till we can either find a way to pay for a full reconstruction, because this is the maintenance part of it here, the mill and overlay, right? So if it's a $3,000 or $4,000 special assessment or bill going to this homeowner now, if we kick that can on the road for another 10 years, yes, they don't have to pay this $3,000 now, but if on full reconstruct in 10, 15 years from now, it might be $40,000. And then where are we going to pay for that? I mean, and that's what we're running into in the core area of town is, right, how do we get into these neighborhoods and not really be detrimental to the residents in those areas by reconstructing their roads, but also giving them the road to drive on that they want, that's safe for everybody to do. And that's what I guess Public Works, Dustin and Dan have been working on to try and to get to that point. And that's where we feel this is the best way to get to that. Yeah, it's a big number to swallow as a commission and to tell the residents that we're going to do this to you. But like Commissioner Olson said, that we deal with a lot of the calls that come in that people built the home 10, 15 years ago, and that's still new to them. I mean, that's still a fairly new house, and now the road is getting to the point where, you know, they're calling and complaining about, you need to be doing something with this road. You know, I've been paying my specials right now for my house. It's still new. I want to still look that way. And this is just that way to really prolong that. You know, if we can do that now and give them another 15 to 20 years before we hit that next level, or just keep prolonging it. It's just a typical maintenance of a car is what we're looking at. So, but like Dustin said, I don't envy a decision on this, because that's a big number to go out to the residents and say.
I have a question for Mr. Anvick. Could your staff do any of this? Do you have the equipment and all that, but, you know, not to take on the entire project, but is there some aspects that you could do to, you know, it's still a cost the city to buy the asphalt, and do you have the right equipment to do a project such as this, or is your equipment you've got more designed just to do the patchwork of a small, you know, 15, 20 foot long areas, you know, and things like that?
There's areas that we could do some of this, but then if we were going to just mainly focus on doing this, we'd almost need another crew to do that, because then it would take away from all the other aspects that we're doing with the rest of the city just by focusing on that. I guess kind of where we were coming from is this would be a contractor to take the big parts that are the 10 to 15 years old areas, and we could focus on, like the 2 to 3 block stretches or certain different other areas that are maybe in that core area where we can, hit those areas where the curb isn't so bad and broken up, and there's nothing to replace, utilities underneath that street, where we can go through, mill and overlay that, and then prolong it that way where it's, not that full rehab area. So for us to handle that and get, where we're staffed right now, something this large we won't be able to. We could probably take chunks on, but then it would take away from other things, and that's why we're just trying to focus on, certain areas and certain blocks to try and prolong those areas and let kind of these large projects go, the residents that are, 10 to 15-year-old neighborhoods.
And if I could add to that, engineering has been working with Public Works on them milling and overlaying some roadways that are not part of anything that we've talked about tonight. So they already do have some work that they're planning on doing with their equipment and doing it in addition to what we're here tonight. And then the other thing is that, as I mentioned, the requirement that when you do the actual mill and overlay for these is we do have to do those ped ramps, which adds a whole another level of complexity. And that's why just the scope of this is too big for the manpower that Public Works has.
And I will remind the commission that, previously 100% of this would have been assessed to the homeowners, and the commission has continued to work hard on trying to do a 40%, 60% split, but it's still big dollars. You can't argue that point. So we've made improvements, and we need to, and the 40%, quite honestly, is a policy decision of the commission as to what level we're going to participate there. Because if you to say you're going to go 50-50 split, there's going to be other dollars that aren't available for other projects, because when you have a capital improvement tax fund, is only so many dollars, and that's those estimates are done on a historical perspective of what it's brought in 2021 and 2022, and for the like. So that's and of course sales tax has been running ahead. For the Cass County, it's as a whole, it's been running about 8 to 10% ahead of what it was last year. So, Mr. Scott, do you have something else for us?
Yeah, if I may, Commissioner President, one thing the commission could consider tonight is, in order to move this forward, we could still create the districts and the engineer's reports and so on and so forth, but we could look into other financing options. We can, this doesn't set in concrete the final dollar amounts to be assessed, for example. So it's just another thing for the commission to consider is, maybe as part of a motion, there could be a contingency that staff work on other funding options to continue to lower down the assessments.
Thank you, sir.
There,
Mr. Olson, then Mr. Simmons.
On your, the slide you've got up there on the board, you've got where it's 80% assessed and 20% cost. I just want to make sure, is that what we've said in before? And by us doing the ADA and the other part, that brings it up to 40. We haven't set a standard of 40%, have we? We've set 20%.
Yeah, that's correct. Historically, it has been 100% assessed. We're bringing this forward with our recommendation of being at 80% assessed, which is better for those residents than what has been done in the past. And then, as you mentioned, the reason that it got up to 40% city cost, 60% assessed is because we have added some regional roadways that are not being assessed, as well as the ADA improvements. And so those two buckets have been added to the overall cost of the improvements. The intent is still that the actual mill and overlay part of those neighborhoods is set at an 80-20 assessed to city cost. With this, now again, the commission, and as Mr. Scott said, that can change, but that's what's being presented.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. Mayor, Commission, first of all, I totally agree with Commissioner George on the older parts of town. You know, we've been kicking that can down the road for years, quite honestly. And we've got to do something. So I think, to me, I would rather take some of this money and put it into that. And the second question, Dan, is do the citizens have any say in this?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Simmons. We would be passing the resolution of necessity tonight, and which would open ourselves to the public. We would send letters out, as we did with, for example, the traffic signal recently, to the residents that would be intended to be in the assessment district. And that would give them the opportunity to write letters in protest for these assessments. So that would be, and also be able to show up to the hearing to voice their concerns with that. So there is opportunity for the residents to do that. However, for it to reach a level where it kills the project, is it 80% or?
50% by area of the district is by century code. But again, the commission, city commission can set its own thresholds on things, and they have in the past.
Yeah. For example, in the recent traffic signal, we sent out 1,870 letters, and we got the 7 responses back. This one here would be very similar. There would be quite a few letters going out. Now, the odds that we would have that many letters of protest coming back for this assessment is probably small, that it would actually hit that threshold. So it would really come down to a commissioner decision as far as, has there been enough people in these neighborhoods crying out that they don't want the project to move forward, that it would kill the project? Because again, that also is a commissioner decision. But technically 51% would kill the project, but it's very unlikely with that big of an area that there would be that many people that would write.
Commissioner George.
I agree with you. I'm 100% certain you're not going to get more than a few letters. But I went door knocking in this neighborhood, and I did a lot, as everybody else on this panel did, and I focused a lot of my attention in the wilds. And every person I talked to was like, "Don't vote for specials. We do not support specials." So I know how the people feel.
Anything additional, commissioners? Questions for Mr. Hanson?
I'll make a motion to approve with the condition that staff looks into other ways to finance this project, to reduce or remove specials from this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the basic services plan with the caveat that the staff address how this may be paid for. Mr. Scott?
Sorry, I just, with just one point of clarification, would you like that effort done before we engage the public, before we send out letters estimating the costs and scheduling the protest hearing? Should we come back with these other options before we go to that effort? Because that would be the next step. But we can put that part on hold while we figure this out.
How long do you think it would take, and would that delay the project? I understand the need for the project, but it's the funding of the project that I don't agree with at all. So,
well, that's a good question. I certainly don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on that. So I would think within a few weeks' time, we could really identify some other options. To truly vet them out might take some additional time. I would certainly want to engage our attorney's office. And but I would think we could identify some options. It's just a matter of, to truly vet them out might take more than a few weeks.
This might be the highest amount that they would have to pay.
This would be the highest amount.
And it could,
yeah, I guess the other option would be to say no more than the estimate, right, in the letter, to make sure that there's some kind of wording in that, I think might be appropriate.
We could phrase the letters to state that the city is intending to move forward with a project that could potentially result in an assessment up to potentially this amount, or words to that effect.
And if we can add something in there with adding in something as, that, yeah, we're looking at other financing options as well, so they understand that we're looking into this different funding sources.
Absolutely. We could add a paragraph that states that the commission at this meeting identified the need for the project. However, direction was given by the commission to staff to investigate other funding options to hopefully lower, reduce, or avoid special assessments for the project.
I think that would be fine.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries on a 3-2 vote. Item number 7, a resolution modifying the water rate on page 157. Mr. Scott, do you have this one? We had this was a earlier this was on the consent agenda. I asked it to be removed and brought forward again to make sure that the public understands that we buy our water from Castro Water and from the city of Fargo. Our rates are going up, and the new negotiated rate, our contract is up with the city of Fargo, and also the contract with Castro Waters. So there's an increase in both of those water sources that the city of West Fargo will be incurring. And I wanted to make it perfectly clear to the public that there's going to be a 40% increase per 1,000 residential commercial use users. And that, with that, Mr. Scott.
Yes, thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. My understanding is at a previous meeting, the Commission, they were informed of the increase. I believe it was approved, and the next step was to actually write up the resolution that carries out that particular action. I might be wrong in that particular process, but nonetheless, before you is the actual resolution that adjusts that rate.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Questions? Mr. Anderson.
I don't have a question so much as a comment, but my mind hasn't changed from a few weeks ago at the last commission meeting. I feel that with the potential 2 increases to our citizens that was shared at the last meeting, I don't feel it's appropriate to go to our citizens twice. So I am, especially without all of the data available, I would rather have all the data available to make the best decision possible, and my vote will reflect that.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. To clarify, the contracts changed on January 1st. So we are paying the city is paying the new higher rate, and the citizens are not. So we're incurring additional cost on the services of water being provided to our community. So, again, we're looking for
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Simmons did. Mark did.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Been moved and second to approve the water rate increase of 40 cents for the base water usage. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner George.
I just have a question. So I wasn't here at the last meeting when we were discussing this, but I did talk to Tina a little bit about this one. Something I didn't think of asking until right at this moment is West Fargo charges a markup, don't they, already on the water rate? And how much is that markup that the city charges, and where does that money go?
Well, thank you, Commissioner George. I'm not familiar with the exact amount of that markup, or honestly, if there is a markup. I would say that if there is a markup, it is based on the notion that we still have to convey that water to the home, maintain those particular lines, so on and so forth. So what we pay in wholesale to Fargo costs us more to deliver and maintain for the residents. So, but I'm sorry, I don't have that number.
The contract does not include any distribution or water towers, so that's all on us. So that's that's in the calculation of retail versus wholesale price that we pay this, our sources versus what we sell the water to the public. Mr. Anvik.
Mr. President, Commissioners, I can maybe try and put a little more light on that. I believe right now, I think what we are going to be paying, I think it was like $3.40 is what we're going to be paying now. And that's why we're just passing that 40 cents on. That's all. We're not inflating that 40 cents that we're just incurring. But like you're saying, that extra markup that we do or whatever that is to maintain our system, our water towers, all the infrastructure, replacements, everything like that, to do that, so basically it's that extra $3.40 is just to make the water and what Fargo is charging us, which is, I guess if we had our own water plant, we'd be paying that, then some, on top of that. So the rate we are getting is actually a pretty decent rate for that. And then that extra is to basically maintain our own system. So I guess to do that, I guess Commissioner Anderson had asked some questions earlier about how much water is about per month that we're using. And I kind of just did some numbers and roughly, basis on the month where we're at, but it's anywhere between 80 million to, I guess our high is about 150 million gallons per month, or per month that we use, for that. And if we, I guess, don't vote to pass this 40 cents on, it's anywhere between probably about 33 and 60,000 per month that would be missing out on revenue, or I guess subsidizing, or however you want to look at that, until we do a rate increase or however you want to go forward with that. So I guess maybe it's confusing how I'm talking about.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, so that makes sense. So I guess what I'm getting at then is, originally in my head, I was supporting this 100%, but then it's like, wait a minute, do we have enough in that overage to cover that difference for a period of time? I know the rates need to go up, but like Commissioner Anderson was saying, versus going up twice, would there be enough in that fund, which I'm sure there's a fund, to cover those expenses or not?
We don't know that right now.
Yeah, that I couldn't tell you.
We've asked for the information, and we just don't have it. Commissioner George.
So if we don't have it, then I guess Commissioner Anderson makes a really good point, is we don't have all the information to necessarily vote.
But we're spending an extra $45,000 to $60,000 per month that we know that we're falling in arrears for.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Are we in arrears, or is there enough in that reserve fund to cover it, since we're upcharging the water, which I know goes mostly towards maintenance and water towers?
This is raw cost. The 40 cents is exactly what our increase is. There is no margin additional percentage from the Delta.
Right. And if we would have a major water main break or something like that, it would eat up that $40,000 in a month, just like that.
Does anybody know how much is sitting in the water fund? Like, does anybody here know that?
I don't know what
I do not.
I don't know what the balance is in our water fund, but that's right. Again, I'd point out that that reserve fund is to handle our breaks, the emergency situations. This 40 cents that Fargo has increased that we are paying, again, if we don't pay that, it's the single family residents that are subsidizing the heavy users. I mean, to put it in a different light, is again, could we keep paying the bill to City of Fargo? I imagine we can. I don't know, again, what the exact balance is in our fund. We can keep paying the bills to keep the water coming, but effectively what is happening there is, without collecting that additional revenue through the billing of our users, you can look at it as the single-family users are paying the same rate as the heavy users, and therefore really subsidizing or giving a discount to those big users versus what really should be charged. So can certainly look to get those particular questions answered.
We can be very discerning as to what the increase might be. I think that's our best alternative, is that once we know the facts, then we have to. But at this point in time, we're spending, as Mr. Anvik said, anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000 more a month in the raw cost of what we're paying for water. So.
And this is an enterprise grant that pays for itself. Or enterprise
That's the way
fund.
it's
Mayor?
Enterprise
designed,
fund,
yes,
fund, yeah,
but we don't have that number.
right.
Mayor,
Commissioner Simmons,
thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the water rate increase.
I second it.
we have a motion and a second to approve the 40-cent increase on the base water charges, both with Cass County and with Fargo, the city of Fargo. Is there any further discussion?
Just a quick comment.
Commissioner.
I do struggle with this one, but I will have to trust the staff, I believe, as far as having that emergency fund there. We don't want to end up in a situation where we have a major issue either. So I guess this one's tough, but that's where I'm going to go, so.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes on a 4-1 vote. Thank you. Item number 8 is the reconsideration of the Noble Hair Enterprise Grant. Commissioner Mark Simmons. It's on pages 158 to 164 in your packet. Commissioner Simmons, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, after talking with the staff and the developers, we've all kind of gotten together, and I'm very hopeful and confident that we're going to find a solution. And I most certainly don't want to hold this business owner up, because I think that's going to be a huge asset downtown. So I'd like to make the motion to bring this back for reconsideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second, Commissioner Olson. It's been moved and second to reconsider the enterprise grant for the Noble Hair. We are voting on a motion to reconsider. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Now, again, Commissioner Simmons,
Yes.
your motion to reconsider is on the table, and it's your discussion item.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just think again, this is going to be a huge asset for downtown. And the whole deal is we want to move downtown forward. That's our point here. So I will go ahead and make a motion if there's no other discussion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Could I ask Mrs. Sanders Berglund to please come to the microphone and remind the public what this is involving? Thank you.
Sure. Good evening. The Noble Hair is, the goal for the Noble Hair is an experience-driven cocktail bar. So they'll focus on whiskey, they'll focus on wine, but really they're trying to activate this space downtown, which would be located in the building, the Firm, next to the POW MIA Plaza. Really, the goal is to create a space in which people can have a great conversation. The environment is extremely welcoming, and the goal here is to create a space that there's a destination.
Thank you. And because of the overall project cost of $450,000, this meets the maximum threshold of $150 with a 50%. So $75,000 would be the grant dollar amount that we are awarding for this enterprise grant.
Correct.
That's correct?
Correct.
Okay, commissioners, anybody else have any questions? Please, Commissioner George.
I just have a quick comment. So, of course, I missed the last meeting, but I watched it shortly after it happened, and this one broke my heart a little bit based on how it went. In watching it, I can understand the commissioners' points of view, what Commissioner Anderson was saying, as far as you wanting to be a family-friendly area. I have 3 young nieces in the area, so I completely understood his point of view. Also, Commissioner Simmons' concerns on the parking, which is something we continue to discuss. So I understood those thoughts a lot, but I also, in listening to the presentation, I don't drink at all, but this looked like a place I would actually want to go to. I thought it looked like a really unique experience. It looked like an upscale place, some really cool appetizers. So this is something I think I would welcome to the community, and I'm happy that they'll be coming here, or hopefully be coming here. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other discussion? Again, we'd have to take action on approving the enterprise grant for $75,000. That's the nature of this business.
And you have a motion in a
You have a
second,
motion-
right, Mayor?
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. The owner of that facility is in the crowd. Welcome to West Fargo. Item number 9 is the city administrator's report. Mr. Scott, do you have anything as our assistant city administrator report this evening?
No, the only thing that Tina wanted me to remind you of is our next meeting is on a Tuesday the 21st.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any correspondence? We do have one piece of correspondence that was in our packet. I'm sure you all have read it. Is there any commissioner that has any non-agenda item that he or she would like to bring forward this evening? Okay, is there any department head that would like to bring forth anything this evening? With that, Commissioner Simmons.
Motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. God damn it.